Wow, that's pretty cool. Hey, so I had a really big presentation planned, but I'm just going to chuck those down there and forget all about it because my name's on a really big screen. And they told me not to keep turning around to look at it, but this is pretty mental for me. So I'm going to probably keep turning around to look at it, so I'm really sorry. The reason I put my cards down there is because something happened on the way in this morning. I live in North Devon. I grew up in Bristol, so I grew up in a city, and then I moved to the coast about 14 years ago, and I would never change it. So when I come to a city, especially London, I get quite overwhelmed. I find it really difficult to navigate my way around, and I always seek out the nearest body of water I can. And that's generally because water holds memory for me, it holds connection, so no matter where it is, I know it's the same water that my kids and me have surfed in, swam in, played in. My relatives in Mauritius, in Bangladesh have played in as well. It holds that connection, so I feel immediately safe and grounded. So this morning I went to, I think it's St. James's Park, nodding, yes, there's some nods. That would have been my way in. And I stopped on the bridge through and I looked and there was this beautiful swan having a bath this morning. And I stood there for a moment just like, no AirPods in, nothing going through my ears. And I just listened. And there were people walking past me really quickly on their phones, listening to things, not taking a second. And this one woman caught my eye. And I was smiling because I was like, oh, this is so beautiful. What are these people doing? And she smiled at me. And for a brief moment, she stopped. And she stood on the bridge next to me, looking at the swan, and went, oh, it's beautiful, isn't it? And I said, yeah, I think we need to slow down. And she just went, yeah. And we shared a moment of complete silence and both went about our day. And I was like, wow, I got across the bridge and thought, I can do this speech. Why? Because that's what we need. We need to slow down. We need that connection because we're so busy and people who are walking there not even noticing what they're walking past, what they're ignoring. So I just, blew all my speech out of the window. I've got 14 glorious slides that I'm now going to be rushing to get through. But that's part of the conversation. It's creating ocean advocates everywhere. That means that person rushing to work across the bridge in the morning that isn't taking notice of that beautiful swan having a bath. I mean, who doesn't notice that? Clearly lots of people, but I did. And people need to notice that more. So we're going to rush through the agenda. I'm sure, hopefully you can all see that. I'm looking at these little screens because I'm really determined not to do that, but it's so cool. Okay, I think we should have like a little pound box for every time I go, that's so cool. So who's in the room? That's part of our agenda. We're going to look at what actions us as Surfers Against Sewage have taken. We're going to briefly touch on British overseas territories, very briefly, I promise. Otherwise, that's a really big wormhole that I won't go down. How we can change the narrative. You'll notice there's still a question mark on the end, because when I first put this together, I said, how can we change the narrative? And I sat and I went through it all and I went, actually, why am I asking? We just can do it. So there's no question mark, but I just didn't remove it, so sorry. It's really important that we are thinking on that global scale, but acting in our own backyard, because we are a global community. And then especially when you bring into that British overseas territories, whatever your feelings on them are, that creates a massive global reach. And then hopefully, but I can't guarantee, I'm going to tie it all up with a really nice little bow at the end in the conclusion. There we go. So who is in the room? When we're looking at who's working in the environmental or the ocean conservation sectors, generally the only research we can find there is based on race and ethnicity. Not quite sure why that is, but that's the only research that's really readily available. And that shows that there's a huge disparity, although it is improving. Look at me, I'm here, that's an improvement. So, but we're not looking at the other elements of diversity. We're not looking at the growing and increasing communities that identify as LGBTQ+, LGBT, do you know, the queer community, however you want to say it. I hate being put down to an acronym. I hate it when I was referred to as being BAME, so I can't imagine how people like being called an acronym. So people in whatever community you identify as, and however gender diverse you are, we're not taking notice of that. We're not researching, actually, are those voices being brought into the conversation around ocean literacy and ocean conservation? But what it does bring to us is all the isms of ableism, racism, sexism, all of those things. I mean, obviously it's really quite impossible to be in here if you have a certain disability that affects your mobility. So again, is that being exclusive? Do we have hearing loops in here? I don't know. I'm probably sure that there are, hopefully. But all of those things, and with the way the world is growing and increasing, it's becoming this massive, massive space. But equally, it's getting infinitely smaller. The reach is smaller, all the connections online. If we look at who is running the ocean world and the ocean conservation areas, that's a really small demographic of people. So, should we really be asking who isn't in this room? So, us as Surfers Against Sewage, what have we been doing? So, since I've come on board, we've been doing lots of stuff prior to that, but the first thing I did was initiate an internal review of our own demographics and a cultural assessment to just see where we were, and that was all totally anonymous, so people were free to say what they wanted. And it was really nice to say that because many more people identified as having more mental health issues or issues of neurodivergence, which actually hadn't shown up in HR. So is that because people are more worried of going for a job and actually being honest about certain conditions that they may have, certain additional needs that they may require? But when they're embedded in the organisation and they see the organisation is working to help them, they're more confident in actually being honest about where they are, who they are, which I do think is very true. I'm like, oh, no one's holding up a green card yet, we're okay. So we then looked at our outward-facing membership to see that actually the majority of our members were from a certain wealth bracket. Not surprising, but again, really important to have that data to see who's listening to us, who's following us, and who we're working with. So our partnerships is really key. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I think the key thing in everything is the bottom one, which is listening to people. Having that conversation, not just asking questions because you want the answer in your questionnaire, but actually take note of what is being said. Ooh. I promise I'll be really quick on this one because sometimes I'm like, oh my God, this really gets me. It's quite personal. So when you're looking at British overseas territories, it's often viewed as this really positive thing that we're putting in place with marine protected areas, which is fantastic, and we're looking after the sea. But it's so far away, really far away. That's only, 3 million kilometres of British waters worldwide are designated MPAs. That is fantastic, no? Mixed bag. But 7 countries, only 7 countries in the entire world are the ones who've established 80% of those marine protected areas. That's a really small number. And the largest 10 marine protected areas are run by only 4 countries, of which the UK owns the most, okay? And those are the UK, the US, Australia, and France. Now, I'm just going to leave you to sit with what their demographic is as a country, or as countries. They're rather just like us. It's a predominantly white space. Therefore, are these ocean spaces just becoming run and owned by a very small demographic with an obligatory outreach towards a local charity group? Or are the local community being brought along and having those conversations with them? Because it does need to be a global community and a global conversation. See, I told you we'd be really quick on that one. Sorry, I take really deep breaths. I ran out of oxygen very quickly. I think I should be a big wave surfer, the amount of oxygen I hold. So, how we can change the narrative, and we absolutely can. This is how. We collaborate. I'm going to have to look behind me. Okay, we collaborate. That's me in the top with 2 fantastically wonderful Syrian refugees that I surfed with as part of Wave Wahinis. So you look at who's delivering in the area, you look at who's already working in those fields. You don't need to go and create something completely unique, because I guarantee if you think it, someone is already out there doing it on the ground level. Just find them. And how can you, as an organisation, benefit those people and that partner? This is not a one-way thing. You're not connecting with them to boost you, to boost your input. You're connecting with them to see what you can offer, because generally you're coming as a bigger organisation. You have more power. Therefore, you have more to give. Okay, they need you, but you need them as well, equally just as much, and that's really important. And we've started to make sure that that's happening with Surfers Against Sewage, in terms we work with Black to Nature on repeated initiatives running through Ocean School. Those looking at me. What am I doing wrong? Sorry, was that just for us? So we've worked with them on initiatives that run from our Ocean School, our education programme, our Bathing Waters conference, all of those things to ensure that they are very aware that we are fully engaged in what they do as an organisation, not just them coming along with us. So that's really important. But to be present within your communities. We're part of a surf community, we're part of the ocean activism community, so we make sure we're at events that we can possibly go to where that's relevant. But one of the more important things is enabling that new generation. So we're working closely with putting internships for young people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds to come and share time with us. So those young people are paid for their time. That's really important. You can't ask certain communities to do things for free when there's a real choice between I'm the only carer for my house, for example. My mother's really ill, so I look after my younger siblings. Do I have the capacity to go and volunteer for 2 hours? Or can I go and work in my local fast food chain for 2 hours? And I know which one they're going to choose, the one that enables them to feed their family. Okay, so you need to make it worth their while. And engage with other organisations that are doing this. For example, the Opening Up the Outdoors, fantastic. If you're looking for someone to connect with, they're a brilliant organisation. I'm one of their graduating pilot cohort. And what was really quite interesting for me is the support to be where I am today didn't come from within my sector. And that's really sad. It didn't come from within surfing. It didn't come from within ocean activism. In fact, surfing certainly were actively trying to stand in my way, putting barriers in my way. It came from outside the sector. It came from Opening Up the Outdoors. It came from people like Phil Young and Kemi Nizaram, and Matt Bart, who saw that I had passion, who saw that I cared, but who also saw that I don't have a degree, who saw that I left college with 1 A-level because I moved out of home and didn't have that support network. They saw that I was a single parent for a while. So they saw all the barriers that the surfing community didn't see and didn't realise. And so then I became a cohort with an amazing group of other people who were working within outdoor spaces, and it was that community that supported me to really continue and really follow my passion to engage more people in surfing, in ocean literacy, in ocean conservation, and in access to water. And so it's thanks to them that I'm standing here today, by and large, because so many barriers are set up with education. And I was super lucky that Surfers Against Sewage saw my CV and didn't go, oh, she's not got a degree in geography, marine biology, she's not gone to uni, and this and this and this, she's not. They went, oh, let's give her a chance. And obviously bowled them over in my interview, clearly. But they took a punt on me, and hopefully that's been paying off over the past 9 months. And I'm looking at my boss, and she's going, yes, it has. So good. I'm not fired at the end of this. Hooray. But they're looking for someone like me. They're looking for a spark plug. They're looking for someone who maybe isn't educated, but who really cares about what they do and will fight for that with the right support. And that's what that's given me, is that right support. But that didn't come from within my community. It came from outside of it. So what are we doing as a community to make sure that we're supporting people like me on that journey? Okay, because you need to. And we'll all be super familiar with this. Okay, Jacques Cousteau, we only protect what we love, we only love what we understand, and we only understand what we are taught. I was only exposed to surfing through my daughter, who is now my son, wanting to do it. So that was my exposure. And through that exposure, I saw the lack of equity within that sport. I saw the lack of equity within then that environmental ocean conservation that I then went on to learn, because there was litter everywhere when we surfed. And so I learned a lot just from the exposure and the access that gave me. But had that not happened, I might not have been here to do this. So if there's one thing I want you to take away, apart from my stunning delivery and constant breath holding, is who is in the room? Look at your rooms, look at your meetings when you're having them back in the office, and ask yourself, more importantly, who isn't in this room? Oh, thank you. Oh.